defense. This is a government that is paralyzed by its own legal advice, paralyzed by its rebellious backbenchers, and paralyzed by the fear of being found out for having no real vision for this country.
Today wasn't just a difficult day for Keir Starmer, it was a public unraveling of his authority. He didn't simply lose control of the conversation. He lost the room, the narrative, and whatever grip he still claimed over Britain's foreign policy. This wasn't routine political sparring. It was a slow, methodical dismantling of his leadership. Broadcast live for all to witness, Starmer attempted to project the image of a calm, measured statesman. But that facade fractured quickly. His critics, led by Keir Starmer, went on the offensive with surgical precision, exposing the cracks in his government's handling of everything from Britain's shrinking influence abroad to its uneasy ties with China. From being sidelined in NATO discussions to enduring public mockery over Labour's internal divisions, the hits kept coming, and Starmer's response: not resolve, not conviction, just a brittle, rehearsed denial, the kind that repeats itself in the hope that consistency might mask weakness. It didn't. So the question now is, what exactly did he say in his defense? Let's take a closer look.
On the news. This is a weak statement from a weak Prime Minister, which can be characterized in 2 words: noises off. In his statement, the Prime Minister said, "We urge Iran and Israel to honor the ceasefire." He said, "We are using every diplomatic lever to support this effort." What diplomatic levers? Are they the same levers he's using with his backbench rebels? Is he just asking them to please play nice? Let's be honest, Mr. Speaker, nobody cares what this Prime Minister thinks, and why should they, when he doesn't even know what he thinks, and clearly no one cares what he thinks because he was not involved. We used to be a strategic player on the global stage, Mr. Speaker, advancing Britain's interests with confidence.
Order. You may not wish to hear the Leader of the Opposition, I do. Can I just say, it doesn't do anybody good in this chamber to try and shout somebody down who's speaking. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. They can shout as much as they like, but we all know the truth. We used to be a strategic player on the global stage, advancing Britain's interests with confidence, and now we are on the sidelines. Over the last few weeks, historic events unfolded in the Middle East, and at every stage, Britain has been out of step with the US and out of the loop with Israel. Last week, the Prime Minister came back from the G7, insisting that there was nothing that President Trump said that would indicate he was about to get involved in this conflict. Days later, the US launched its attack on Iran's nuclear facilities. He had no idea what was going on. The week before, Israel launched an attack on Iran, and it became apparent that the UK was not even informed about the attack in advance, despite us having been involved in previous preventative action. How is this standing up on the world stage? On Tuesday, the Foreign Secretary, a lawyer, repeatedly could not say whether the US strikes against Iran's nuclear facilities were legal. This is a government that doesn't know what it's doing. Let me make the Conservative position clear, Mr. Speaker. Iran has been a direct threat to the UK for years, plotting terrorism on British soil. It must not get nuclear weapons. And this is a time for Europe to step up, and the UK should be leading. Instead, we have an Attorney General using international law to constrain and restrict the UK while the Prime Minister hovers indecisively on the sidelines. What we need is a leader instead.
What unfolded today wasn't just another political exchange, it was a public dismantling of Keir Starmer's credibility. Keir Starmer didn't simply critique his foreign policy, she methodically stripped away the veneer of leadership he's worked so hard to maintain. Her tone remained composed, but every sentence landed with precision. Starmer didn't just appear out of touch, he appeared absent. As international tensions rise with Israel and Iran on the brink, and the United States conducting precision strikes, Starmer's silence has been deafening. No decisive statement, no visible leadership. Even his own foreign secretary struggled to respond, resorting to vague legalese that sounded more like she'd just been briefed by the evening news. But the moment that defined the debate came when Starmer reminded Parliament and the country that Britain used to matter. The silence that followed spoke volumes. And when she delivered the line, "Nobody cares what this Prime Minister thinks," it landed like a hammer blow. Brutal, memorable, unforgettable. That moment will echo across headlines, social media clips, and dinner table conversations. The foreign policy community took note too. Once a leading voice on the global stage, Britain under Starmer now risks fading into irrelevance. This isn't just a case of punching below our weight, it's as if we didn't even show up to the fight. Before we continue, if you're finding this breakdown insightful, a quick like and share goes a long way. And make sure to subscribe for more deep, unfiltered analysis on the shifting landscape of British politics. Alright, let's get back to it.
3 lawyers. Last week, I wrote to the Prime Minister about how this conflict has underscored the folly of the government's £30 billion Chagos surrender deal. The Diego Garcia base is of obvious strategic importance for conflicts in the Middle East. They're shaking their heads. They don't understand. It is obvious. It was used extensively. Diego Garcia was used extensively during the war in Afghanistan, including by the United States. And at Prime Minister's questions, the Prime Minister said that this Chagos surrender had been opposed by our adversaries, Russia, China, and Iran. Since then, it has been widely reported that China have offered massive congratulations on the deal and conveyed that it fully supports Mauritius. So can the Prime Minister now admit that he was incorrect to state on the floor of this House that China opposes the Chagos deal? And can he confirm if he still views China as an adversary? Under the terms of his deal, if the US were to launch an attack from the military base on Diego Garcia, we would have to inform the Chinese allied Mauritius government. Will he abandon the deeply flawed surrender deal? Because if not, when will he introduce the legislation setting out the details of the Chagos surrender so Parliament...
Kemi Badenoch delivered a calm but devastating critique of what she called the chaos surrender deal, drawing attention to one of Britain's most strategic military assets, Diego Garcia. Her warning was clear: under this agreement, the UK may now require consent from nations aligned with China if the United States were to use the base in any future conflict. For many observers, that revelation signaled something far deeper, a troubling shift toward geopolitical vulnerability. Keir Starmer, who often casts himself as the adult in the room, suddenly finds himself accused of backing a deal that even Beijing has openly praised. In Parliament, he confidently claimed that China opposed the arrangement, but just days later, Chinese officials were recorded publicly supporting it. That contradiction left analysts asking the uncomfortable question: was Starmer misinformed, or was he misleading? Badenoch's delivery was measured but cutting. No shouting, no theatrics, just precision. She dismantled the government's position with surgical calm, revealing a picture of a UK seemingly willing to trade away strategic independence for diplomatic optics. The implications are stark. If the United States were to launch operations from Diego Garcia, Britain could now be obligated to notify a government aligned with Beijing. Critics argue this isn't just a diplomatic misstep, it's a direct compromise of national security. Yet rather than confronting these charges head-on, Starmer has chosen to hide behind vague platitudes about unity and international cooperation. But beneath that polished rhetoric lies an unsettling reality. Under his leadership, Britain's military sovereignty is quietly slipping away, and China, watching from the sidelines, is the only one applauding.
Mr. Speaker, it is crucial that there is a clear, united front in full support of Ukraine which secures peace on their terms. The stakes could not be higher. We need the government to be leveraging British influence in every way it can for Ukraine. So can he tell us whether he pushed for clearer language in the NATO communiqué about Russia being the aggressor in this conflict? And can he update us on the UK's current position on Ukraine's accession to NATO, given the absence of detail in this year's communiqué? We must ensure our leading role continues, but this requires strong leadership and an ability to influence. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, the Prime Minister may have finally returned to this House after a fortnight away, but in truth, he is all at sea. Irrelevant on the world stage, impotent in the face of rising illegal immigration, and now with 126 of his own MPs all openly undermining his authority, his government is incapable of making even the smallest changes to bring down the cost of our ever-expanding welfare bill. There is no way they're going to be able to pay for our defence. This is a government that is paralysed by its own legal advice, paralysed by its rebellious backbenchers, and paralysed by the fear of being found out for having no real vision.
Now, the gloves are off. Kemi Badenoch isn't simply critiquing foreign policy anymore, she's taking aim at the entire government. Her remarks painted a portrait of a leadership frozen by fear, buried under endless legal consultations, and quietly undermined from within its own ranks. She didn't need a dramatic punchline. The reality that 126 Labour MPs are reportedly working against Starmer is the punchline. This isn't leadership. It's a slow-motion civil war. The welfare budget is spiraling out of control. Immigration policy drifts without direction, and defense strategy sounds more like wishful thinking than national planning. And where is Keir Starmer amid all this chaos? Sitting behind a stack of legal memos, projecting control, but showing none of it. Badenoch didn't just call him cautious, she accused him of disguising incompetence as caution. The image she left hanging was brutal. A prime minister returning from a diplomatic tour, lost in his own press statements, while the country burns behind him. The problem isn't just that he's out of his depth, it's that he doesn't even realize he's drowning.
We live in more volatile times than many of us can remember, with conflicts in many parts of the world that are evolving in a very fast and dangerous way. There's never been a more important time to work with our allies and to be absolutely serious in our response. That response was unserious. Unserious. To suggest at a time like this that the Prime Minister attending the G7 summit and the NATO summit is avoiding PMQs is unserious. What happened at NATO yesterday was historic. It was very important at a time like this that NATO showed unity and strength with a commitment to the future, not just to the past. That took a huge amount of work with our allies over the last few days and weeks. We have been centrally involved in that, crafting the final outcome, and we were recognised as having done so. I'm proud that we helped put that summit into the right place yesterday, and the world emerged safer as a result. And that was the unanimous view of 32 allies leaving NATO yesterday. For the leader of the opposition to belittle it just shows how irrelevant she and the party opposite are becoming. They used to once be serious about these issues. They used to be capable of cross-party consensus. And all of that is slipping.
Starmer finally spoke, and somehow managed to make things worse. His tone was calm, measured, even rehearsed. But that was precisely the problem. This wasn't the voice of a confident statesman defending British interests. It was the uneasy tone of a lecturer scolding students for not respecting NATO. He tried hard to sound serious, yet his remarks looped endlessly, repeating the same hollow phrases. Rather than addressing the real concerns, being misled over China, sidelined by allies, and watching Britain's defense credibility erode, he dismissed Kemi Badenoch as unserious. It was a weak deflection, not a rebuttal. Starmer wanted applause simply for attending NATO, even as Britain's influence there shrinks by the day. He pointed to a handshake as proof of global relevance, while key military decisions were made without the UK even in the room. And when he claimed the summit had made the world safer, you could almost hear the collective eye roll from Kyiv to Tehran. This wasn't a defense of policy, it was a defense of presence. Then came his parting jab at Badenoch, calling her remarks playground stuff. It might have earned a polite chuckle from friendly editors. But to working-class Britons facing rising costs, global instability, and a leader who needs legal advice before speaking, it felt tone-deaf. Starmer entered Parliament hoping to project authority. He left looking like an intern who brought the wrong file to the wrong war. Badenoch didn't just land a hit, she outclassed him with precision, facts, and composure. He wants to be seen as a global leader, but right now, he's a ghost at international summits, a whisper in NATO, and a punchline in Beijing. And people, including his own MPs, are beginning to notice. The question Britain now faces is simple. Can the country afford a leader like this?